everyone, and welcome to Victoria's Cantina and the Cantina Chatter Podcast. In this 6th episode, we are pleased to welcome Paul Harrison, co-owner of Jedi Temple Archives and co-author of Star Wars: The Ultimate Action Figure Collection by Steve Sansweet. Our topic of conversation is the state of the Star Wars toy line, as well as reveals from the New York Toy Fair 2017. Now, Paul, thank you so much for being on the show today.
I really appreciate you having me here. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's great to finally have you on here. So you're very involved in Star Wars collecting, quite obviously. You co-wrote that book. You run Jedi Temple Archives. Tell us a little bit about your history with Star Wars and collecting.
I remember it clear as day, actually. It was kindergarten in 1979, and one of my classmates, his name was Vito, brought in, we always had show and tell, and he brought his vintage Luke Skywalker X-Wing pilot figure to show and tell. And, even though Star Wars had been out for 2 years at that point, 1979, I hadn't seen the movie, but I was like just enamored of his action figures, and I just knew that I wanted it, and I had to get one. And that following birthday, my parents got me that same exact figure and a couple others like Darth Vader, and the passion kind of like never left my bones from that point forward. So in 1985, you probably heard of the Power of the Force line. That was the final Kenner Star Wars line. It was only on store shelves for a short amount of time. I was still actively collecting, even as a young student back then, when most of my friends had stopped playing with their toys. I was still buying them, and I was fortunate enough to get those last 15 figures right at Toys R Us. So that was pretty cool. And then, of course, we had that 10-year, break where there's nothing on store shelves. And then once the rumors started popping up everywhere that the Star Wars line was coming back, you better believe I was first in line, and that's when the new obsession took over.
Nice. Very cool. That's about when I got into it as well. It was 96, I think, is when I really got into Star Wars, and I started collecting those Power of the Force figures, Power of the Force 2. And I was really into it. I mean, it was the little figures, and there was also the 12-inch collector series. And those are the ones that I would get like for Christmas or birthday and so forth. And some of those are really hard to find back then. And even some of the 3 3/4-inch figures, like I remember Princess Leia being super hard to find initially.
And C-3PO, I remember that.
Yeah, and the Stormtrooper too.
Yeah.
And
yes, hard to believe.
And then I think it was in that time where all of a sudden there was like an avalanche of new Star Wars product that came out, and it was very hard to keep up, especially as a little kid. You're trying to buy all you can with the little bit of birthday money you have and stuff. So, I mean, I can totally relate to that, getting into something that you're very passionate about and love so much, from a very young age.
And back then, every year was getting better than the previous year. It was too much to take in sometimes in a very good way,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was so much stuff, and it was getting progressively better. Like you'd have figures like the Luke Skywalker that came with the T-16, and I think there was the ceremonial one. It had like new likeness of Luke on the packaging, and things got better pretty quickly. A lot of those initial things from 95, 96 were kind of all over the place, but after that it was just like a mountain of toys from 95 all the way until the last several years. And I mean, we're still getting stuff now, obviously, but it's kind of changed a good little bit in recent years.
It has. Not necessarily for the better either, right?
Exactly. So you co-wrote Star Wars: The Ultimate Action Figure Collection. Can you tell us a little bit about your involvement with that project?
I had a mutual friend who was also co-author on the book, Dan Curto. He was famous for working with Rebel Scum for years and years, and we developed a pretty cool friendship throughout the years. And as Steve Sansweet and company were Googling images for their book, thank God, Jedi Temple Archives came up on their Google searches, and my name came up as the photographer. And, Steve didn't know that I knew Dan, but Dan knew that, of course. And Steve's like, we got to get in contact with this guy. Do you know him? And so that's how I kind of got brought into the book project. And it was probably the best experience of my life professionally. I got to work with an amazing man, Steve Sansweet, who is just his intelligence is so hard to describe, but he's such a brilliant man and taught me a lot of neat things, and always knew how to word things instantly, make your words sound better. And I helped with a couple of the descriptions, but primarily I was involved with the photography, and it's just cool to see. The book's 5 years old now, but it's so cool to open a book and see that I took that picture. It's a really neat thing. So I'm just so glad I was part of that project. It was quite a lucky experience for me.
Oh, that's awesome. And yeah, very great people. Dan Curto, been reading his stuff for a very long time. Like you said, Rebel Scum. That was one of the first websites I ever read, going back, 15 years ago, or probably longer than that. And Steve Sansweet, of course. I remember the very first time I ever heard of Steve was back in, I think it was the mid to late 90s. It was when the special edition came out on VHS, and they were selling it on QVC. And they had another guy named Steve who was the salesman on the show. And every once in a while they would get together and they would do these Star Wars programs. They'd have all these different Star Wars toys and collectibles and stuff that they'd be selling. And I remember that on this one episode, they had gotten the special edition on VHS. It sounds so funny to say that. Wow. And I begged my mom to order it for me. And luckily she did. But yeah, I mean, that was the first time I had seen him. And then after that, I'd see him pop up here and there. The Star Wars Insider, of course, he'd have articles every now and then. And yeah, I mean, he's still very involved, and a huge collection. It's pretty crazy all that he has.
And he oversaw fan relations. He was a great face for bridging, fandom with Lucasfilm. So that was a really cool little gig he had there too.
Absolutely. Lots of great stuff. So you did go to Toy Fair this year, 2017, and you saw all of the new Hasbro Star Wars products. What was your overall impression? What did you think about what you saw?
Well, if anyone who visits Jedi Temple Archives knows that I'm pretty vocal about my affinity for, the super articulated 3 3/4 inch figures, and of course, nothing like that was revealed. They did have a lot of nice items there in the 6-inch line. The new Death Squad Commander and the Jawa look fantastic. Their details is right on the money. We got to see the Emperor's Royal Guard 6-inch figure up close, and of course that was the first time any of us got to see the, whether they were repacked or all new, the 40th anniversary vintage figures, 6-inch figures, and the large card art, the vintage Kenner packaging. I mean, and it's all cool and trendy, and it kind of appeals to long-term collectors like myself as far as visually, the packaging and everything. But I really got the vibe from even people who are fans of the 6-inch line that it was a very lackluster presentation. It didn't scream 40th anniversary. It didn't feel like a celebration like the 30th anniversary collection did 10 years prior. Mm-hmm. People say there's reasons for that. There's a lot of Star Wars entertainment in the calendar year now. In 2007, there were no new films. There was no TV shows at that point. They could focus on the toy line, and I do understand that, but there was nothing felt celebratory at all, and that's what really made me leave shaking my head.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff there, and like you say, lots of new media. There's movies, there's TV shows, there's comics and stuff, but I mean, it just seems like it's really hard. When they totally and completely neglect what originally made, this brand, these movies and these toys so well loved and famous and so enduring. Mm-hmm. And when you see that they have all these new products, but they don't quite commemorate the 40 years of Star Wars in a way that's more of a respectable tribute, it's just a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow.
I totally agree. I mean, when they showed the 3 3/4, they did have 3 3/4 inch, but they were metal figures, and you just wanted to, just scream to this primal scream, like, what are you doing? Like, you couldn't give me Simalu, you couldn't give me a power droid, you couldn't give me, the last couple of figures from the vintage Kenner line to be updated in the modern line. But no, we have a 5 POA metal figure now of Princess of the main A New Hope characters. I don't know. I mean, if there's anything to look forward to on the horizon, Steve Evans, who's the design director at Hasbro, and again, this could be my interpretation, so you can blame this on me interpreting it this way, but he did say that every good story has a beginning, middle, and end, and Toy Fair was really the beginning of the story of the 40th anniversary celebration. So I'm kind of hoping that whether for Star Wars Celebration or Comic-Con this year, that we do get to see something more in what super articulated 3 3/4 inch collectors are hoping to see. And I've heard, I have many sources. I've talked to people who say something good is coming. I don't have any details on it, so I'm kind of hoping that it's going to fit into what Steve Evans said, that something more stuff that we want to see is indeed coming.
Yeah, we can only hope. I mean, there's the 6-inch stuff. I agree is cool. I mean, it's kind of gimmicky, but it is kind of cool to see a 6-inch figure on a vintage card back. Mm-hmm. And I like the presentation. Like, I received the ones I had ordered from Hasbro Toy Shop, and the cards are very sturdy. It's a very nice presentation, and they look great. But you think about that, and then you also think about those die-cast 3 3/4 inch 0 POA figures that you mentioned. And I mean, I'm not sure that it is. It probably isn't. But I mean, it kind of feels like a slap in the face to 3 3/4 inch super articulated collectors.
I think it's a good way of saying it. It may sound a little bit violent or dramatic, but I think it's exactly what it is. It's just a punch to the gut, Mm-hmm. I mean, they couldn't even give us 12 figures or redo the 12 back figures from 1978. No, they do it in 6-inch form. And like I said, I'm not the only one complaining about this. 6-inch collectors feel like they're getting the wool pulled over their eyes too, because they're like, why? I just bought these figures. Why are you repackaging them? And which tells me that the vintage packaging does not have the same meaning to them as it does to us who collected, since the vintage days or even the neoclassic era 95.
Definitely. And I've actually seen that myself too. I reviewed the Princess Leia on 40th anniversary on my YouTube channel. And that's one of the things that I saw. A lot of people were commenting and they were saying, oh, I just spent $20 on this figure and now I got to buy it again. And I'm sure that part of it is that, like you're saying, maybe 6-inch collectors or, a good sector of them aren't totally receptive to that vintage aesthetic. But at the same time, I mean, $20 is pricier than, we would have paid on a 3 3/4 inch figure, 5-10 years ago. So you feel that a little bit more.
That's
and
right.
At the very least, what I would have liked to have seen them do is do new heads on all the figures. I mean, they did Leia. She looks great. And Luke had a pretty good head already. The paint was kind of sloppy, but they could have done a new head on him, maybe a new expression or something, and a new head on Han. If they really wanted to push and sell these, I think that this would have been a good opportunity while also maintaining the exclusivity of the original releases.
Yeah, I agree. Or an exclusive accessory or something that would warrant plopping another $20 down for. I totally agree. It's just funny, the character differences between 3 3/4 inch and 6-inch collectors. And I probably should be saying 3 3/4 inch super articulated, because when we have the debates at JTA and stuff, people, the 6-inch collectors laugh at us because they see the 5 POA as garbage, and they don't understand that. No, we don't want that either. We want super articulated figures. So sometimes we have to reiterate the super articulated descriptor. But like exactly what you said. I mean, we would buy a figure 4 or 5 times and not even bat an eyelash. It was feasible. It was fun, and we could spend time looking for the best paint jobs on these little tiny figures. And now you have to panic that you place your order with Amazon in time before it sells out, and it doesn't come back in stock for months. So it's just a totally different culture and a different mindset of new collectors. It's just it's just not fun anymore,
Yeah, it has lost a lot of its luster for sure. And like the 5 POA stuff, I was totally on board when they initially announced it back in 2013. I think it was a Toy Fair 2013. And I was totally on board because they said, we're going to make these, but we're going to continue making super articulated figures in the Black series in both 6-inch and 3 3/4 inch. So I was like, okay, I can dig that. And the very novel thing about those earlier 5POA figures was that we already had ultimate versions of those characters. Like we already had super articulated Anakin and X-Wing Luke and so forth. So it was just kind of a novelty. It was kind of fun to also get them in 5POA. But nowadays, when you have films like The Force Awakens and Rogue One, and you have Star Wars Rebels, you don't really have any options. You're kind of stuck with having to buy the 5POA figure. You don't get a choice to buy a super articulated version of that character, and I think that's pretty frustrating for a lot of people.
Yeah. I was in a completely different place than you in 2013. I was actually digging my heels into the ground when they were announced, because I knew that Hasbro was walking away from super articulated figures slowly but surely. And I got ripped apart online for posting articles that, Hasbro wants to get out of the business of making super articulated figures. And look where we are. Now it's an exclusive at Walmart, and we're lucky if we get 8 new figures a year, But I knew it was coming, and Hasbro's like, give them an inch, they'll take a mile. They decided to go with 5POA in 2013, and look at it's a landslide. It's all they care about. It's all they're doing for us now.
Absolutely. And I was totally on board with it, and I kind of felt that the same way that you're describing a little bit after that. Once it started coming upon The Force Awakens, and we finally started getting photos, since they didn't release anything publicly, and things were just like a surprise. This is what we're doing. And once it was revealed that it was all 5POA stuff, I got pretty concerned. I did a video on my channel. It's called Hasbro's Killing Super Articulated Star Wars Figures, and it got it's over 11,000 views now.
Wow.
A lot of people, for whatever reason, are drawn to that topic, it seems like, and the comments on it, people are just kind of concerned that slowly but surely they're going to kill off super articulation, at least in the 3 3/4 inch range entirely. And that's kind of what this video is about. It's just kind of like a slow moving thing where, they're going to flood the market with 5POA, and, things are going to sit. And then with like the Black Series 3 3/4 inch at Walmart, which is the absolute worst place to carry a line like that.
No kidding.
Yeah, I know we've talked about this. Like the availability of the newer figures is deplorable. It's extremely difficult to find stuff, and I still haven't seen like the Captain Phasma wave at my local Walmart. It's almost been a year since that came out, and
Wow.
I just kind of feel like in this video, what I was talking about was that over time, those figures are just going to be so hard to get, and people aren't going to end up buying them because they're not going to be able to find them. And then Hasbro's going to one day say, well, we tried this, it didn't work, so now it's just 5POA all the way.
Yeah. And, Hasbro says the line's doing well, but again, that's because Walmart's buying them, and something's falling apart at the Walmart distribution level, because they are either flooded in some stores or just non-existent, like in my area. I think I have one Princess Leia in the blue gown from The Force Awakens hanging, and I don't know how it got there, whether it's a return or not, because that case assortment never arrived, but it's hanging there, and a Finn and a Han Solo in trench coat. That's all it's been there for about a good year, I would say.
Right. That's exactly what it is here, too. Plenty of Han in trench coats, plenty of Finns, a few Poe Dameron. But, I mean, it's really hard for me to even go in there anymore because I already know what I'm going to find every single time. And it's not like it's just one Walmart. It's like all the Walmarts in this area. That's exactly what they look like.
I mean, I remember probably the best example was 2006, the Saga collection. I remember going to the store I would go on toy runs every weekend, don't get me wrong, but I could bank on every 4 to 6 weeks finding a new case, the new wave of figures. It was like clockwork. And I bought each figure 3 or 4 times, the Army Builders even more. And the end of the year, I just had hundreds and hundreds of figures from the collection, and it was very enjoyable. It was fun. It was exciting. You got that that rush when you were hunting for stuff because you would be rewarded by finding them. And now there's absolutely nothing on store shelves anymore. Nothing.
Absolutely. And thinking back to that time, that was a really good time to be collecting. I was living in San Antonio, Texas, and It was like clockwork. I had it memorized, like when stores would be restocking. Like Target, I always knew it was going to be Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And if I wanted to find something, I needed to be there at opening on those days. And I would always look out. I would always, get everything that I wanted. If there was anything I couldn't get, it was something like that very hard to find expanded universe wave in the 30th anniversary collection. But most everything else I was able to find, and that was pretty much the case for several years after that. But now it's like I pretty much only exclusively buy stuff online because I just never find anything in stores. And I mean, I like the thrill of the hunt. I like being able to go to a store and find something. And, I like it when there's a few different samples so that I can select the best paint job and whatnot. But, I mean, you just can't do that these days. I mean, you can't go to a store and find anything. So, I mean, you don't really have any choice.
But you know what else made that time period even more enjoyable than knowing you could find new stuff on the shelves? It was what the product was, the awesome exclusives, the vehicles, the figure waves. I mean, even if you didn't like two of the figures in the wave, you still bought them because the whole wave was gorgeous. I mean, who wanted another General Riken from the Ultra line on a single card? But we bought it. We bought it multiple times. It was just a totally different culture of collecting,
Yeah, totally. If you wanted to get Aayla Secura's Jedi Starfighter, you could go to Target and you could get that. If you wanted to get Obi-Wan's or Anakin's exclusive, the second versions they had in the films, you could go to Toys R Us and get those.
That's right.
There were plenty of options, and if you skipped something, I mean, it wasn't a huge deal because there were plenty of other options to buy. And that's totally not the case anymore. It's kind of more of this take it or leave it sort of mentality that we seem to be seeing. And it's a little frustrating.
That's a great way of saying it. Take it or leave it, because that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, totally. And the thing that comes to mind when I say that is, for some reason, I keep thinking about the AT-ACT.
The Rogue One AT-AT?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness gracious. Do we have to criticize that again?
No. It's just, for some reason, it keeps coming to mind. I don't know why right now while I'm talking about it. We'll just leave that.
I mean, that arrived at Target on clearance. I mean, just a shocker.
Yeah.
$74.97, I think it was.
I missed out on the big AT-AT when that came out, 2010, and then 2013 with the Endor repaint. And I was just like, well, it's so big. I don't have room for it. What am I going to do with it? I don't have anywhere to put it. So I just kind of passed on it back then. But then, as the overall quality of the line has decreased and, things have gotten very kind of unfortunate in some cases, I've kind of been going back and, buying some of those pieces again. So I got one of those. I got the Endor AT-AT last summer, and it was still cheaper than I would have paid for the AT-ACT.
Wow, unbelievable.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Were you happy with your purchase?
I couldn't have been happier with it, even though I had to pay more than I would have paid in the store.
Yeah, that's a beautiful vehicle. I'm glad you got it.
Totally. So what I wanted to ask you, and I kind of think I know what you're going to say because we've kind of touched on it already, but what do you think is the biggest area that Hasbro is neglecting longtime Star Wars collectors?
Obviously, super articulated action figures is a huge problem, the lack of, but I really miss the mid-size vehicle assortment. That was just a great way to augment your figures. And back in the day, every Jedi had a starfighter, and every clone had a battle vehicle, and I just really miss that. They were such quality vehicles. They had tons of features. They could accommodate the super articulated figures, and the paint jobs were fantastic. The sculpts were dynamic, and we just don't have anything like that anymore. It's so heartbreaking. And in all fairness, I can understand why Hasbro doesn't make that line anymore, because the Shadows of the Dark Side Clone Wars line, no one was buying them, and they had to give them away for a song. So I think collectors are to partially be blamed for why we don't get good vehicles anymore, but I just wish they would give them another chance. Like, we've been punished long enough. We'll buy them this time. That's what I feel like saying to Hasbro.
For sure. Yeah, the mid-range assortment, I think, is one of the greatest things to ever come out of the Star Wars modern line, especially back during that time, like 2006 to 2010, a little bit after that. Yep. just solid releases in the mid-range, vehicle after vehicle after vehicle. Jedi Starfighters. We were talking recently about the Republic fighter tank, things like the AAT and the AT-AP, just all kinds of different things. And, all of them could be tied directly back to the films or to the Clone Wars. And nowadays, there's not really a mid-range line. The closest we have is these vehicles like that they're selling, like is it the U-Wing or something that you can get for like $50, and it comes with a little Poe Dameron figure, or not Poe Dameron, Captain Cassian Andor figure.
Yes.
And but it's like all flimsy and everything. It's like they're kind of offering similar things, but the quality is just not there, and they're making you pay more for them.
Yeah, it's ungodly. And speaking of the Republic fighter tank, I love that thing. I have all 3 colors, and they're just the greatest things. Rolling wheels, holds 2 pilots. It's just the best.
It's an awesome design. When I first played Battlefront 2, I was just absolutely blown away by all the different things you could do in that game, first of all. But yeah, the Republic fighter tank, when they finally made it as a toy, I was just captivated with it. It's an awesome toy, like you say, and everything works very well. It's very fluid. It has these little kind of hidden compartments, and it's just one of those things that I love hidden compartments for some reason.
You want to know what's so innovative about it? It was never in the Clone Wars television show, but it made its debut in the Clone Wars line, and it fit in perfectly. They were just they brought their outside of the box thinking into the line, and just, again, I use that word a lot. They augmented the line with non-specific vehicles from the show. They weren't scene specific, obviously, but they fit in. They couldn't fit in better, and that was just, they were just so on the ball with things like that back then.
Exactly. And it was one of those things, like you mentioned, that came in 3 different colors. So it's like, well, what flavor ice cream do you want? You could get in any color you want.
Right.
And not initially, of course, but one thing, and this is kind of off topic, but when I saw Rogue One, I saw there was that hover tank, and I think they could have used the Republic fighter tank in there. I think it would have fit just fine.
True. Absolutely.
Then they could have offered it as a toy again. Hopefully not that really cheap thing from 2013, but that thing was terrible.
That's a debacle, isn't it?
But you can't find them anymore. They're super expensive when you find them on the secondary market, if you can find them.
Yeah, that's something I'll probably never understand, how those rinky-dink vehicles go for so much money today.
It's crazy. I was looking at them, and they were very small. Obviously, they were charging you pretty much the same price, maybe even a little bit more than they were previously. But you were just getting these super lightweight things. Like when I first got the boxes of those, 'cause I remember when they came out on Amazon in 2013, I ordered them, and the box got here. I'm like, this has got to be an empty box. But no, they were just so lightweight, very thin plastic. And I actually did like the Jedi Starfighter, the Revenge of the Sith version. I thought it was pretty cool because it was, more movie scale and the dimensions were more accurate. But all the other stuff, I was like, this stuff sucks.
Yeah, I guess, you're definitely right about the scale, but sometimes scale has to be sacrificed, even if it's bigger, just for more play features and, for more of a solid toy. And
Sure.
I think the midsize definitely wins in those areas.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's one of my favorite vehicles. I love the Jedi Starfighter, the older Jedi Starfighter, especially Darth Vader's Sith Starfighter. That's my favorite one.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that's going to be coming to our reviews shortly.
Oh, nice. I love that one. I had read, it was Dark Lord, The Rise of Darth Vader. It was a novel that came out in 2006, I think. And
Yes.
I really enjoyed the book. And once I found out that they were doing the Starfighter that he flies around in the book, I was ecstatic. I bought it on day one as soon as I found it.
It's awesome. We also have his astromech droid too, part of the Saga collection.
We do.
So it's...
And it was the same thing with Mace Windu's Jedi Starfighter. They also made his droid available later.
Yes, they did. It was just, that's what I mean. They just thought about every way to, complete a scene. If they're going to make one thing, they made sure they had all the other parts with it. It was perfect. Absolutely perfect.
Right, and if you wanted Mace's clones to go along with him, you could get those too, and everything matched, everything fit in so well. And even things like the AT-AP, You could buy all your clones, you could buy all the Wookiees and stuff. And then when they came out with future vehicles, they kind of color coordinated everything. They were definitely very organized and very methodic about how they approached the line back then and how they integrated all these different characters and different designs and vehicles into the line. And it really made it feel like one, like they cared. And then two, that, they were really trying to do something special for, the collector. Again, sadly, that's just not something you see these days.
No, I know it's I guess is it pathetic to wish for the past? We're always supposed to be moving forward to bigger and better things, but man, when it comes to Star Wars collecting, I want to go back into the womb, so to speak. I just want to go back to that golden era. It's just such a fantastic time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that whole principle going forward, I mean, I generally agree with that, but at the same time, it's kind of like what we're seeing with the 6-inch on vintage card backs. I mean, is it going forward if it's stuff that they've already repacked and they're bringing it back again, and they're not really celebrating what originally made, all this as popular as it is?
Yeah, true.
So with regards to Star Wars vehicles or toys, action figures, Hasbro's done a lot of great stuff over the last couple decades, and there's so much stuff that we could talk about all day that they've done. What would you say are the standout items in your personal collection?
Gosh, it is definitely hard to pick something specific. Maybe I can name a couple things here. I was a huge fan of the 30th anniversary collection Droid Factory sets that introduced us to that Build-A-Droid concept prior to the Legacy Collection getting launched. They were 6 sets, and they each contained a piece of C-3PX. I thought that was like a perfect marriage of, character with a droid. We got Kit Fisto and his astromech droid from the Tartakovsky Clone Wars series. We got Luke Skywalker with a battle-damaged R2-D2 from A New Hope. We got Han Solo with R3PO, and on and on and on. And it was just such a brilliant. The 2 packs were from all over the Star Wars timeline, original trilogy, prequel trilogy, comics, and to me, it was just the perfect way to launch that Build-A-Droid concept. So that's one of my favorite things Hasbro's ever done. There's countless vehicles in the Clone Wars line that I love. When it comes to a basic figure line, I probably would go with the Legacy, the Red Legacy Collection or the Vintage Collection. Obviously, I prefer the packaging to the Vintage Collection, but there were some great characters in Legacy Collection that I just can't discount. We got the Luke Snowspeeder outfit, which is one of my favorite figures of all time. We got some great expanded universe characters like Jaina and Jason Solo and Kay Kruk and the Force Unleashed Shock T. So I think that I could. It would be more than a couple hours of me running down what some of my favorite pieces are.
I never got that Shock T. Now that you mention it, I never found it in stores. Still don't have it.
It is a dynamic figure. It's beautiful.
It is, and it's like $100 on eBay.
Oh my goodness, is it that high?
It's pretty high.
And not to discount some of Hasbro's more recent stuff, like I love. A lot of people roll their eyes at the Black Series Phase 1 3 3/4-inch line. Like they didn't want to see another Anakin and Padme again, or a Clone Trooper Sergeant. But I have to say that they're awesome action figures. They're done very well. They enhanced Anakin, they enhanced Luke, they enhanced Darth Vader. I'm a sucker. Like Hasbro just has to do a little tweaking, and I'm on board. I'll buy it. As much as I want to see new characters they've never made before, that's my number one preference. What they did with the Black Series was definitely enough to satiate me. I think they took advantage of that, and people not like me were slowly losing interest and dying off and not collecting anymore, and it got to the point where the collector drop off was just too much for them to bear, and that's why 6 inches front and center now.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think that those earlier, when they initially brought out the Black Series in 3 3/4 inch, they did some pretty nice updates. Like you mentioned, Anakin. He had a new head. The Padme was pretty nicely done. There was R2, which I never found R2, so I still don't have that R2. But it kind of, to me at least, looks like it's like probably like one of the ultimate R2D2 figures.
It's nice, yeah.
And then they did the Wookiee, is it Maru? Is that his name?
Yeah. Oh, and let's not forget about the updated Pablo Joe, which is gorgeous too.
Another one I never found, still don't have. But yeah, I mean, yeah, they definitely did some really good updates back there, and they offered some new things that are very popular and sought after, like Darth Plagueis.
Yep.
That's one that's exorbitantly high on the secondary market. And then there were a few that maybe they just weren't exciting characters like Mizam or just some of those different characters that they kind of redid that were similar to previously existing figures, but different at the same time.
I love that Clone Wars Mace Windu from that Meru wave, and people ragged on it. They said his skin was too caramel colored, not dark enough, and it was really just the same figure. But I thought it was brilliant. It has the smoothest ball jointed wrist, and it came with Django's helmet, and I just loved it. I really did.
Yeah, it's a cool figure. I do think it's a little bit too light skinned overall, but yeah, it has.
It is, but it's still enjoyable, right?
Sure. I mean, it's a movie character that's kind of done in Clone Wars style. I mean, there's really not a whole lot you can't love about that.
Yeah, true.
And I think it was like the next year for the Black Series when they swapped the packaging with the TIE Fighter pilot backdrop. And some of those clones were just kind of questionable. Like, I always love getting more clones in the line and stuff, but like the plastic on some of them, like Commander Doom, I think it was, and Commander Thorn, it was just like super rubbery. And yeah. I guess at that point when things kind of started, turning in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Even the last wave, which most of us were all excited about with the Han Solo and Carbonite and the Leia Bausch, such great sculpts, but horrible paint jobs, and just ruined them,
Yeah, totally. Like the Han in particular, the one that I have anyways, it looks like his eyes aren't even painted like on the sockets. So I need to replace that one at some point. But yeah, I mean, that was a big thing around that time. It was that the QC just really dropped, especially like on paint and stuff like that. The figures themselves were nice. It was nice that they were offering those characters and those designs, but yeah, QC kind of went down, and I think that they've kind of improved QC quite a bit since then. But at the same time, the offerings aren't quite as cool.
Agreed. That's key now because there's so few slots in a calendar year for these super articulated 3 3/4 inch figures anymore. That to get a Han Solo trench coat, it kills the momentum of the line and makes things pile up, and they gotta listen to collectors. If it's a collector's line, let us vote on what we want to see. Finish those vintage Kenner figures you've never updated yet. Listen to what we want. Don't make what you want. Mm-hmm. I've had some success. I've begged the Hasbro guys to re-release the Emperor's Royal Guard, and they finally listened to that. And Ponda Baba, I begged them for that. That's coming. And let's just hope that I just recently begged them to release that Captain Rex from the Legacy Collection line that got canceled and was never released. Uh-huh. So let's hope that's next.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, even though we say this Black Series line being exclusive to Walmart is a bad thing, because it is. I mean, they could still treat it, a little bit better by offering some of those really sought after figures that people just weren't able to get back then, like you said, the Royal Guard. I mean, that's one that was awesome for them to re-release, and I bought like 6 of them.
I think we all did.
Yeah, and it's crazy. They still get them in stock, for a while. Now they've lasted.
That was like one of the smartest things that they ever could have done as far as listening to the fans, because it seems no one can get enough Royal Guards in 3 3/4 inch. And we're proving that. We keep buying it. Even the 6-inch collectors are buying them for their collections.
Yeah, it's an awesome figure. I'd probably put that one in my top 10. But if they did treat the Walmart Black Series like that, give fans more of what they're asking for,
Right.
Make some new figures that, aren't necessarily from The Force Awakens or Rogue One, but maybe something from the original trilogy or the prequels. Just something kind of, like something that, hey, it's cool to see something like this. It's a surprise. I think people would buy that sort of stuff.
It's been so long since they released a Cantina alien or a Jabba skiff guard that it would probably go crazy if they ever added that to the Walmart exclusive line. We'd go nuts over it.
Absolutely. Like, the Cantina aliens for me are my absolute favorite things to collect. Like, from all Star Wars media, movies, collections.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love... Have you seen my Cantina diorama that I assembled?
I have. It's beautiful.
I mean, I love that. I mean, it's something so simple because it's a cardboard backdrop that they manufactured 20 years ago. Could easily bring back very inexpensively. And, just a few tables and chairs and bar sections that they geniusly did. And, a very diverse range of characters from that scene. I mean, you could do something so great with it, but like you say, there's no Cantina aliens, there's no Jabba's Palace aliens anymore. So we're really limited on being able to build upon that. But it really doesn't take a whole lot in my mind to make, longtime Star Wars fans happy. It's just a matter of whether or not they want to do those things.
Totally agree. That's you've spoken it perfectly. I couldn't agree more.
Okay, so another question I wanted to ask you is, if you were to grade the state of the Star Wars line as manufactured by Hasbro, what sort of a letter grade would you assign to it at this point in time?
I guess we have to qualify if we're talking about 6-inch or 3 3/4 inch. For me, 3 3/4 inch is a D or an F, and 6-inch is probably a B right now. I think they have some room for improvement, but it's pretty solid.
Yeah, the 6-inch line, and I know that, like, on the JTA discussions, like, this is something that comes up, is that when you make these 6-inch figures, you can't really mess up. Like, I think as a collector, it's easier for me to forgive little inconsistencies or imperfections on 3 3/4 inch figures because, they're smaller and, they're not going to be as blatantly obvious. But when you have a 6-inch figure and it has a flaw, it has an eye that's a little bit lower than another eye, or it has something that's not painted correctly on its clothing, you're going to see that, and it's going to stand out. Any flaws that they have in the smaller scale are going to be magnified when you bring them out in a larger scale.
Exactly. Yeah, and we have seen how dramatic how bad it looks. I mean, look at that first Leia. I mean, that was a nightmare. That was an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, I remember when those pictures came out. I really couldn't believe it. I was honestly kind of shocked that they would put something out like that.
But to their credit, I mean, thank God they fixed her and did right by her, because the new figure looks so good.
Yeah, she's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm really happy that they did fix her too. And they didn't really waste any time doing it either. So I kind of feel like maybe the original release was already in production before they started working on the new one. Otherwise, maybe they would have fixed it sooner. But in any case, it's really nice that they did fix her. And, she does look as great as she does.
When I have my one-on-one discussions or just small talk with the Hasbro guys at Toy Fair, they one of them wanted to know where I had heard that I posted a rumor at JTA that they were, she's going to be pulled from the case. They're working on a new head sculpt, and they wanted to know so badly how I knew that, because it was a big secret, and of course I couldn't reveal how I knew, but I did. My initial rumor report stated that she was supposed to be pulled from the case and then replenished later, and that didn't happen. Obviously, the bad Leia shipped, and everyone was unhappy. Mm-hmm. But I did ask them, was she supposed to be pulled from the case? And they said no, absolutely not. So I think that they planned all along to release two versions, or maybe that was a way of recouping costs for the new head sculpt. I don't know, but I found that very interesting that they had no plans to pull her from the case.
Yeah, that is interesting. And it could very well be that that's how they were going to work it out. Because even when I saw that awful Leia at Comic-Con, they said, oh, that's not going to be the final one. We're gonna fix her. And then finally the figure comes out in December. It's like, really, Hasbro?
I know. They should not have even shown that Leia. Just people reacted so violently towards that.
Yeah, it is pretty awful. I'm going to hang on to it, though, just for archival and historical purposes, to look back on it one day and be like, oh, gosh.
Yeah. Look how bad they were.
Right. And that wave, it's probably my personal favorite wave in the 6-inch black series they've done so far. It's just a magnificent wave, but then you have that one figure that should have probably been the best one in the wave. It's the absolute worst one.
I know. But again, I keep bringing it back to this. I mean, thank goodness they did the right thing and developed a new head sculpt, because I give them so much credit for that.
Absolutely. And they didn't waste any time doing it either. I mean, it was just 2 months later.
Yeah.
Here's the updated Leia. She looks 10 times better than what you already bought. But you know what? I love her. I could see her right here on my shelf, and she's pretty amazing.
She does look great. I mean, even for a 6-inch figure, you got to give credit. She looks good.
She does. I would say she's probably one of my favorites. I think for human likenesses, sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. I think that's probably one of the better ones.
Yeah, agreed. Totally agree.
So, Paul, if you were Hasbro, what would you do for the rest of 2017 or 2018 that we don't know about already? What kind of a card would you pull out of your sleeve?
Well, if I was working at Hasbro, I would release. I know they're working. I know that they did work at some point on a new Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. I would get that out for the 40th anniversary. I would get out the Death Star, no matter how much it hurt my budget to get it out, because I would know my fans and my collectors have been desperately wanting a new Death Star playset. Which, by the way, it is rumored that they've already worked on that too. I would So definitely get the Death Star and Darth Vader's TIE Fighter out, and then I would release a dozen vintage Kenner cardback figures, whether some are repacks, definitely some new sculpts, but definitely get out the ones that fans want to see, like the ones they haven't made yet. Maybe redo awesome characters like Yak Face and a Man or Squid Face. Maybe release a blue Snaggletooth, something like that.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be great. I'd love to see Hammerhead on a vintage card.
And since they can't afford to give us good vehicles anymore, I would probably bring back the mini rigs line. Maybe re-release the vintage Kenner ones and then start adding some new ones into the mix, because they could probably sell those for $15, $20 with a figure or something,
Yeah,
no bad an eye.
Yeah, that was a great assortment too, especially when they had it going from Clone Wars. I think it was until like 2013, and then they started packing in an extra figure, and then they raised the price, and then they just did away with them altogether.
And people loved them. I don't know why it didn't do well. To me, it looked like they sold.
Yeah, they did. That was a really fun line, and a lot of them did kind of sit. I remember finding several of them like at Marshall's or Ross, stores like that.
Yeah.
All right, Paul, is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners about your history with Star Wars collecting, or just any other random thoughts?
Just encourage you to check out Jedi Temple Archives. We have a great audience and lots of heated discussions and laughs and lots of fun. And Victoria's Cantina is part of our site. We're so thrilled to have her with us, and it's an honor to talk with her on this podcast. So we have a great relationship, and I hope more people would come.
Awesome. Well, hey, Paul, I want to thank you so much for joining in today on Cantina Chatter and sharing your thoughts and your experiences on the Hasbro Star Wars line. Thank you so much for being with us today.
And again, thank you for having me. It's been a blast.
All right, my friends, if you've enjoyed this podcast, be sure to like, be sure to subscribe, be sure to visit Jedi Temple Archives. Check out Star Wars, the Ultimate Action Figure Collection. And as always, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. Until next time, bye-bye.